It is a pleasure to share some thoughts with you this morning on the progress in the adoption of biotech crops, genetically modified crops or GM. There were two highlights about the progress in 2010. First was the significant progress on many fronts worldwide, and secondly, the increased participation of developing countries. This is a complex subject, and I think it's best presented under three topics. First, what has happened in terms of adoption from the genesis of commercialization in 1996 to 2010. It's the 15th anniversary of commercialization. Secondly, what has been the impact in terms of increased productivity that affect food security and also the alleviation of poverty. And last but not least, what does the future hold? The 5 remaining years of the second decade of commercialization, 2011 to 2015. First, looking at adoption, what can we say about the adoption of this technology from 1996 to 2010? First and foremost, in 2010, the 1 billionth hectare of biotech crops were planted worldwide. Now, just to get an idea of how big this area is, that is equivalent to more than the total land area of the US, which is 937 million hectares. That is enormous. If we look at the adoption from 1996, when we had 1.7 million hectares, and compare it with 2010, when we had 148 million hectares, that makes this technology the fastest adopted crop technology in the history of modern agriculture. And that is due to the fact that we've had millions of farmers use this technology. In 2010, we had 15.4 million farmers use this technology. And remarkably, 90% of those farmers were small, resource-poor farmers in the developing world that represent some of the poorest people in the world. We also had an increase in the number of countries that use this technology in 2010, increasing from 25 in 2009 to 29 in 2010. And the 3 new countries that featured were Pakistan, Myanmar, and Sweden, the first Scandinavian country to employ this technology. And lastly, we look at the adoption in terms of developing countries versus industrial countries. In developing countries in 2010 represented 48% of total global area. And we expect developing countries to plant more than industrial countries in the very near future. We see that growth in developing countries in 2010 was 17%, equivalent to 10 million hectares. This is 3 times higher the area in industrial countries, which is 4 million hectares, or 5%. When we look at the impact of biotech crops over the period 1996 to 2009, there are 5 major areas. First, an increase in crop production and value equivalent to $65 billion US dollars. Some of that has come about through reduced production costs, and also an increase in productivity of 229 million tons. Now, the second is protection of biodiversity. If in fact we can produce an additional 229 million tons on the 1.5 billion hectares of land that we have globally, then we can also do something else. We can reduce the amount of deforestation, slash and burn agriculture. So 2 benefits here that represent 2 sides of one coin. On the one side, increase in productivity. On the second, protection of biodiversity. And what about the environment? There has been a significant decrease in the application of pesticides. More precisely, 393 million kilograms less pesticides being used. That's 10%. good for the environment, good for the consumers, good for the producers. And how about climate change? The fourth area. We have actually decreased the amount of CO2 by 18 billion kilograms in 2009 alone. That's equivalent to taking 8 million cars off the road for 1 year. And last but not least, the contribution to the humanitarian cause. In 2010 alone, we had 14.4 million poor farmers benefit from this technology, getting significant increases in income, which is a contribution to the alleviation of poverty. And what about the future? What can we say about the last remaining 5 years of the second decade of commercialization, 2011 to 2015? I believe that there are three factors that must be in place. First is political will. Second is implementation of regulation in the developing countries that is responsible, that is rigorous, but not onerous. And third, a new wave of improved biotech crops that will deliver benefits. On the first, political will, I believe we have strong political support in the developing countries, in China, in Brazil. On technology and its regulation, we see significant progress in Africa, with countries like Mali expediting the regulation process because they can see that Burkina Faso next door is gaining significantly. And third, in terms of improved crops, we have a full pipeline of technology that will deliver important products. Drought tolerance, 1 year away. In 2012, we will see the first drought-tolerant maize from Biotech being planted in the US and Canada. More importantly, in sub-Saharan Africa in 2017. Secondly, golden rice. We expect to be available in the Philippines by 2013. Golden rice will be a contribution to a very important cause, because what we see today is 6,000 people a day dying from vitamin A deficiency. Very important is Biotech rice, having been approved in China in 2009. This has the potential to provide nutrition for 1 billion people, 1 billion small resource-poor farmers. And there will be new crops, potatoes in Europe, that will be resistant to the most important disease of potatoes, late blight, the cause of the Irish famine in 1845. New crops like sugarcane. So I believe that these three factors of political will, appropriate regulation, and improved biotech crops are in place. And it's interesting to look back at the prediction that I made in 2005, that the number of countries would double from 20 to 40, that the number of farmers would double from 10 million to 20 million, and that the number of hectares would increase from 100 million to 200 million. 2010 is the midpoint, and the good news is that we are on track to achieving those goals in 2015. So in summary, I believe that this technology has a tremendous opportunity for making a contribution to food security and to the alleviation of poverty. It is morally unacceptable to have the situation that we have today of 1 billion people suffering from poverty and 24,000 people a day dying from malnutrition. This technology can make its rightful contribution